Tēnā koutou katoa e mihi ana ki a koutou, kua hui hui mai nei mo te kōrero kaiwhakaako I te taha a Helene Wilson. Kia ora everyone, and thank you for joining us for this week's Coaches Kōrero. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Helene Wilson, Head Coach of the Northern Mystics. Tēnā koe, Helene, thank you for taking some time out to share your coaching wisdom with our netball whānau.
Kia ora, Chonaire, thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Helene, I was hoping we might just kickstart if you would mind sharing your coaching journey today and how you got into coaching in the first place.
Yeah, well, when I was back at secondary school, at my school, my premier netball coach made it sort of something we had to do. We had to coach as a member of the premier netball team. So I started coaching when I was in year 11, a third form team, or year 9 it's called now. So that's when my coaching journey started, and I don't think I've stopped ever since. I left school and trained to become a physical education teacher, and so I've coached at numerous schools, both here in New Zealand and in Australia. Once I left teaching, I had children. I kind of pursued, well, I'm at home, I'm looking after my kids, let's get serious about coaching and learning about coaching. And I continued to coach at my local netball centre, which was Netball North Harbour here in Auckland. And then I went on to representative coaching for the zone, which I think I coached you in the first year of Netball Northern Zone. And then outside of that, with postgrad studies and things, I was fortunate enough to go and work for an organisation called High Performance Sport New Zealand in the performance support team there. And I worked with Black Sticks hockey team and the women's 7 hockey team in their going to the Rio Olympics. So I had some time there before I then became a full-time coach for the Northern Mystics.
Awesome. It's great to hear that you started out as a student coach, and I think that that number is growing rapidly. So I think that's really awesome that that a lot of students will be able to identify with that. It's also where I started coaching as well. And again, with as part of the premier team, there's you jumped into coaching as well. So that's awesome to hear. So Helene, I know you're a mastermind of defence, and so for our first question, what are some of the defence strategies did your team use last year, and sort of how did it change with different oppositions?
Yeah, absolutely. At Mystics, we love intercepting the ball, so our strategies for defence often revolve around how can we actually turn over the ball and get possession. So that's really important to us. So that's a combination of, do you do man-to-man marking or do you mark more of the space? And up in Auckland, obviously Yvonne Willerine's really influenced a lot of our netball defensive coaching up here. And so we do try and do a lot of space mark, which is about taking care of some space, conning the person with the ball and the attackers into thinking that a pass is available and us then coming through for the intercept. So we like to build pressure up front, so through the court, using a bit more restrictive and man-to-man marking, and then hopefully we make our goalkeeper, goal Ds look good in the back, and centre wing Ds as the ball progresses through the court.
Awesome. And I suppose when you're coming up with these defence strategies, what sort of involvement do your players have in sort of like helping determine those defensive strategies based on their own strengths?
Yeah, well, obviously at our level, it's really important you have the players involved. And so it's important as a coach, I think, to really understand how the players see the game and what they do know about defence before you start putting overlaying strategies and structures on them. So always look at what your strengths of your players are. If you've got players that are good at moving and confusing space, you might have power players who are good at standing still and coming from nowhere, but that they can jump and they can change direction really well. So there's always a really big discussion with the players to make sure you're all on the same page. Here at Mystics, I always like to think we've got diversity. So we've got some players that are powerful and can play in the air. You know, we've got big, powerful, strong players in Salu and Phoenix in the back, but we've also got players who like to move and can take space and chase a player down, players like Michaela, Taylor Earl. So yeah, it's just important that you get a bit of everything, and then it's important that the players do know what their role is. So as a coach, you may see a wing D having a particular role, or a goal D having a particular role, or a goal keep. And so if they understand what your role is and you know what you want as a coach, then you can start building your strategy with people that have those strengths.
Definitely, diversity is quite key, and it keeps other teams guessing, and you're not set in one style as well. So you're right around that being an absolute strength.
Yeah.
In terms of new combinations that you might find yourself with each year, how do you? So and it's still coming back, this year as well. How do you have any sort of different process around building those new combinations?
Yeah, well, I think I remember when I first spoke to Sulu about coming back to the Mystics, we had a really long conversation on the phone. I hope she doesn't mind me saying, but about what do the Mystics do in defence? And I said to Sulu, what strengths are you going to bring to the Mystics? What style of game do you want to play? Well, this is how we play. This is how I coach. And so when you have those good conversations as a starting point, you then get on the same page in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And, we know Mystics is not Mystics. We know Sulu is an amazing player at using her body position and her strength to create turnover ball. So we talked about how do we use that strength that she has, but also how do we get her to play more in space and look for intercepts. So we were looking at how do we incorporate some new learning and more space marking into her game, and getting her coming out of the circle and being more of a presence as the ball transitions into the goal third. So, that's a work in progress, but what we want to be able to do is have a goal keep that can play in all ways of defending rather than just one. So our opposition has to guess what strategy we're going to use on any game day.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's identifying the strengths, and then I know as a player you'd thrive off the extra stretch of, hey, let's give this a go, let's try that, and that's golden.
And I think that's the other thing, Sean, just to add to that, I think it's not only about the one player in D. You've always got to think about what your unit looks like. So when Sulu, for example, is playing with Phoenix, the way in which they defend as a unit is slightly different to the way in which Sulu would work with Michaela or Courtney Elliott in the circle. So players have to be adaptable to applying a strategy or a principle of play, but there's little nuances between players that make how they apply that strategy slightly different. And that's also really exciting to coach because that stretches a player as well.
Absolutely. That probably segues quite nicely into that unit defence. And so what are sort of your keys to success or in that unit defence as well?
So I think when you're talking about unit defence, and whether that's a unit of a partnership, like a goal D, goal keep playing in the circle, or a centre wing D playing out of the circle, you also have to think about units in three. So how does your wing D, goal D and goal keep connect, or your centre wing D, goal D, or your goal shoot, goal attack, wing attack as well, because defence does start at the goal shoot and through court. And then you go to your fours, like from, your centre through to your goal keep, or your goal shoot through to your centre. So unit can mean many different things. And I think it's important to start with what you can do as an individual, build into a partnership, build into a three, and build into a four. And to get everyone on the same page, it's important that you understand what your outcome is. So if we're working in a unit of four, what are we trying to achieve with this defence? And you've got to get everyone on the same page first. In some teams you play, it might be the defence might be set up that the goal D is going to look like the person who's the glory with all the intercepts. But sometimes, it might be the wing D that's the key person, and it might be their role might be actually stopping the wing attack from having possession of the ball because the wing attack's a massive ball handler. It's really important that the players understand where your strategy lies within the unit that you're setting up. So you might be space marking in your unit, but the wing D has a job to restrict and stop the wing attack from handling the ball. So if they understand their role and how it all comes together in the unit, then success really starts to happen. It's when they don't understand their role and they're wondering why they're not getting intercepts that it can become a problem. So there's many layers of discussion and understanding, and you've got to start your coaching with what you do individually, but then build it to a partnership and then build it into a unit. I think sometimes as coaches we make the mistake of going straight to the strategy and the unit of 4, and we talk about the strategy and we use language that we all hear, let's do, I don't know, the wall or box defense and things like that. But if you don't understand the layers of what you're trying to achieve and the skills and the outcome you're trying to achieve within that, then things start to break down. So defense, you have to move up and down that scale all the time to get it right.
That's really great, clear advice in terms of building towards and to that final strategy and that final unit. So I think that's really great. Thanks for sharing that. I know I don't want to give away all your secrets, obviously, with Grace and Wiki in the back, but what are your tips for coaching how to defend a tall holding shooter?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And having a tall shooter in the back is a great asset to some teams, but it can also be not an asset if you focus all your coaching around a tall shooter. So I don't think it matters if you have a tall defender or a short defender. It's about what everyone on the court does defensively to contribute. So defending someone like Grace Wiki, I would think actually starts right down the other end, wherever the ball's turned over, everyone needs to make sure that they're contributing to that defensive effort. And the more defense that happens outside of the circle and before the ball gets into the goal third with a shooter like Grace is going to be beneficial, because common sense would tell us that the longer and higher the pass and the longer time it's in the air, the more chance the defense have of intercepting the ball off someone like Grace. So I would look at, if I was defending a tall shooter, the first thing as a coach I would look at is, what does the shooter do to catch the ball? So if quite often tall shooters at a young age can be not lazy, I don't think that's the right word, but they get away with habits that enable them to be quite lazy at the catch point. So they might wait for the ball to drop to them. So they may be tall, but they catch the ball at sort of chest height rather than catching the ball at the height of the pass. So I'd be looking for, how does the shooter catch the ball and where does she like to catch it? Quite often ball shooters like to catch the ball towards the post so they can have a short shot because they're used to sort of being close to the post. So defensively, you flip that thinking around and think, well, if she's catching the ball quite low and she likes catching the ball on the right side of her body or the right side of the goalpost, then I might sit in that space or stay off the body in that space and con that space so that the ball goes to where the feeder's used to catching them and I can set myself up for an intercept. Or you say, right, once she's shot the ball, I'm going to start defending her once she's got the ball through the hoop, and I'm going to push her into a position where she's far away from the post and she's not going to start where she wants to. So zero phase defensively on a tall shooter is incredibly important to ensure that you're taking that shooter out of her comfort zone. So that's just what I can do in the circle. I may put 2 players on her rather than 1. I may have 1 tight on her that promotes the ball into a backspace that my other space marking defender might pick up. So a goal keep might make a goal D look good, for example. But if you start dropping 2 defenders on a tall shooter, then you've got to say to your wing attack and goal attacks down the other end, right, it's your job to mark further up the court and apply the pressure over the ball that we need to force the ball long. And the wing Ds and centres might have to pick up the goal attack outside the circle so the goal D can float in and out of the circle to confuse some of the space and con the intercept. So I think the worst thing you can do is stand man on man on them if you are short. I think you've got to be brave and think about conning the space, but really be aware of where they like to catch the ball. and either take that away from them or promote them to get it where they like it so that you can intercept it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's a lot better to try and intercept the ball further up court.
Yeah.
I suppose we'll go the flip side as well. And so instead of a tall holding shooter, what are sort of your tips around how to coach defending a moving circle?
Yeah, well, a moving circle relies on, I guess, ball to the circle edge as well, and ball being swung and changing the angles so that the players can change the angles within the circle. So on a moving circle, it's really good if the ball gets to the goal third, that you have your defence in the circle, and that's where playing space and restricting the space that the shooters can use is really important. So sometimes you hear sides being called, so you can split the circle into two, and the goal D and goal keep actually take a side, and when a shooter moves into that space, you restrict them and stop them from switching sides. So that's really, really important. And also you can split the circle into top and bottom. So it's really important with a moving circle that a goal D and goal keep always offset themselves in the circle. You know, one's high, one's low, one's left, one's right. And you look to use your footwork and switching on the players to ensure that you can pick them up and stop them from rotating the circle. One thing that we also talk about is being ball side base. So making sure that if you're on the side of the ball, that you get between the shooter and the ball and you play base so that you're forcing the ball to travel across the defender, which sets up intercepts for you. But before you get to the circle edge, I'll be talking to my centre and wing Ds on a moving circle as well. You know, defence is about what happens before the ball gets to the circle. And if you're letting your centre and your wing attack get to the circle edge in the position where they can swing the ball quickly, then a moving circle is really, really challenging for your inside defence to stop. So your centre and wing D have a job of restricting the centre and wing attack, keeping them off the circle. And if they do hit the circle edge, your centre wing Ds should be between the ball carrier and the person they can pass the ball to as well.
That's awesome advice. Thank you for that, Helene. We'll do our last little question because I like what you've already said about that full court defence in terms of how you incorporate, those members further up the court. So we'll just finish off by talking about centre pass defence and some tips and keys to success around that centre pass defence.
Well, I always say to my defence, you've got to get ready before the whistle goes. The communication and deciding what you're going to do has to be happening zero phase before you get to the line. In defence, a good first phase, zero and first phase defence on the centre pass always is reading what the attacker doing. So, you know, you may know what you want to do. You might be doing a 2-on-1 to 2 on the wing attack to stop them receiving first phase and forcing the ball to goal attack. You might be doing a wall where you want to get over the line first, put that pressure and force the ball wide and cut that middle channel down so they can't receive the ball centrally. But if you set up a wall and they're both the wing attack and goal attack have dropped off the line, you're kind of wasting your time sometimes because they're going to burn you second and third phase. So my advice to defence is always call what the attack are doing. If the attack are doing 1-on, 1-off, or you think that they're, setting up a screen, or you think that they're stacking somewhere on the line, get your defence to call it because it'll always make the attack think, shivers, they know what we're doing. So that communication is very phase and thinking about it is really important. The second thing about first phase defence is you've got to commit to it. If the more pressure we put on first phase for the centre pass, the more pressure generates in second and third phase. So I'd say everyone commit to it. So once you've called what they're doing, commit to the 2-on-1, commit to the wall, commit to the drop and the zone, whatever you're doing, commit to it wholeheartedly. And then the key to the practice defensively is how you go from the first and getting the transition into the second. So it's always really important that from first to second phase in the centre pass, that easy quick ball is cut off and there's a defender between the ball carrier and the receiver for second phase. And I always coach my goalkeeper to be part of that first and second phase centre pass, although they're not at the line. If we decide first phase that we're going to be doing a wall and the wing D and goal D and centre all commit over the line, the goalkeeper has to be aware of what the second phase could be to ensure that they're ready to create that pressure second phase. That would be my best advice. Secondly, in first phase defence, again, make sure you know what the outcome is of what you're trying to do. I often see people calling a wall, for example, but not understanding what the outcome of a wall is. You know, a wall is you don't let a person receive the ball centrally in between the defenders. You force them wide and the outside people go hard and intercept the ball. But we often just let them through the middle on a wall. So it's important to understand the outcome of the strategy that you're implying.